Hey everybody, I just wanted to reach back out to you. It's Thursday, um, waiting for the weekend to come, even though I'm probably not going to be doing too much of anything, but it's just the fact of, I don't have to do any sessions or anything and I get to just hang out with the kids. So I'm pretty excited about. I'm pretty excited about the weekend coming up. So we got one more day tomorrow, and then we got the weekend. So I wanted to tell you guys also that you know I probably my kids keep asking me to get on and talk with you guys. So I'm definitely thinking about on tomorrow to kind of let them come and hang out with me and just kind of get them involved to see what's kind of what's going on in their life. So I know that children have a very difficult time being stuck in the house, not being able to see their friends. So I'm gonna give them a chance to kind of talk to you guys about how they're experiencing the corona as a child. So I hope that's going to be fun. I hope you guys tune in. It'll be something that you might want to let some kids or let your kids see, just so that they can kind of see what's going on with some other kids around us. So um, enough of that. I wanted to talk to you guys today about how to look at a negative situation. A lot of times, I have noticed that people struggle whenever whenever they go through something that is either really really bad or really really good. And so people say to themselves, why would people struggle whenever things are really really good? um, what I have noticed in this industry is that most people are very aware of their surroundings. They're very aware of what's going on in their world, and whenever they are aware of that, especially if it's in a negative place, they normally start looking at a lot of aspects of their life, and they kind of hunker down, and they just try to not make it any worse. But a lot of times people really make unhealthy decisions whenever they're doing really, really well, because they get really comfortable. If, let's say, you're making more money, you tend to spend more money. And a lot of times people don't get a chance to, um, uh, a lot of times people don't get a chance to like they don't save their money. They don't budget because they're excited because they got a new job. They haven't had any money in a while. So these are different things that I want to talk to you guys about, is looking at really good situations and then looking at really negative situations, and then how to wrap your brain around it so that you don't fall victim to making unhealthy decisions while being in an unhealthy place. So I told you guys about the poem last week about if, and I told you that it's a really good poem for me. I really like it. But there's a part in it that I wanted to kind of talk to you guys specifically about. So in the poem, it says, in this part of the stanza, it says, if you can dream and not make dreams your master, and if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, and if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. In order for us to really take a good look at triumph and look at disaster, we got to really look at the context of what it's talking about. So let's talk about triumph first. So normally when people talk about triumphs was something that was kind of created in the king and queen, when it was countries going to war with each other. What normally happen when somebody triumph is just not the win. Triumph is the part right after the win. So what happens is so whenever a king would fight another king, and they would take over that land. Um, so they won the battle, they won the war, but what they would do is they would go in and they would handcuff the king, the queen, and the whole family, and they would put them inside of a the back of like a wagon, and they would ride them around the whole city so that everyone would know that they've been beat. So when you think of triumph, triumph is kind of like that gloating that I've been successful, but now I'm going to put it in your face. And so if you look at that, that's one perspective. And then if you look at disaster, disaster is something that is very subjective. It's something that's not you can't define what a disaster is. It's only something that you think of and how you see it. So, if you ask somebody who had family members in the tsunami, or when someone like Katrina, any of those things, those are true disasters. It kind of depends on where you were at. 9/11 was a disaster. But if you ask yourself which one was worse, it's very difficult to come to terms and say, well, that one's worse than that one. It's because it's very subjective. And with that, that's some of the things that I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about was that, yeah, disaster, like I remember somebody there was a book that I read where his wife, his daughter and his mother died in a car accident all in one day. And it's like, is that a worse disaster than a hurricane, or when something else tragic happens? Um, we don't know. I mean, it all depends on where you were and how you experienced that situation. And I think right now we are in a situation of a disaster. We don't know how big this disaster really is. We have companies who, people that own private businesses that are not essential. They're not getting any payments as of right now. They're not opening up their business. This could be a disaster. There's people who are losing their jobs. There are people who don't have enough money to pay rent, and whenever the rents are due, they're going to have to pay back all that money. So there's a lot of things going on. I mean, there's people that are passing away. People aren't even able to grieve or aren't able to mourn. So we have we are in the middle of a disaster, but we don't really know how big this will be. We don't know how long it's going to take. And so with that, we have to look at where are we putting our mind at. And so in the poem it says, if we can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, it's like, how do you wrap your brain around a really good situation versus a really bad situation, but then treat them both the same? I wanted to give you an example of what I mean by this. So, um, the track runner Usain Bolt, I remember when he first came to the Olympics and he broke the record. I remember he ran through, and the first time he ran in the Olympics, he ran. He was so fast that he turned around and he kind of ran backwards through the ribbon, and he still broke the record. And so everybody said to themselves, man, he will never be beat. He will never, no one can ever run this fast. And so I remember when he ran the finals, he really ran it the hardest that he ran it the hardest that he could, and he literally obliterated the record. Uh, and I wanted to talk about not just him, but I wanted to talk about the people who were running behind him. Imagine running and you practicing for 4 years, and you see someone run in front of you and turn around and still break the record. Man, what would that do for your self-esteem? What would that do for how you are seeing the world around you? And so with that being said, those people who lost, they didn't go into their training the same way that Hussein Bolt did. Hussein Bolt was on TV. He was doing interviews. he wasn't doing a lot of training because he had already, it was almost like the tortoise and the hare. Like once you think you got so far, you start to gloat, you start to act as if like you're never going to lose. But the ones that lost, if they go into it and they go into training, they're going to figure out a way to beat that person. And so I was looking at Justin Gatlin, and Justin Gatlin, he was kicked out of track for testing positive for amphetamines, and he was out I think 3 or 4 years, and then they reinstated him back. And I watched him go through, and he started coming back, and he started winning races, and then in 2017, um, he lined up against Usain Bolt, and literally he beat him by almost a fraction of a second. And so with that, I look at so many people think that just because they started out in there and they got a really bad hand at the beginning, it doesn't mean that it's not going to end in a really good way. And a lot of times people get that negative thing happen at first, but then after that happens, it depends on how you see that. If you see it as a victory, then you don't go back in and you don't go work. And I see people just in substance use. When people start to get better, they start to get clean. They start to think that they deserve something, or they think that they should be able to kind of treat themselves. And normally, when they start to get that mentality, that's what ends up happening in their recovery. And then all of a sudden, they're no longer in recovery because they're back in active use. So I want to really express that to people that have substance use, is to make sure that you don't gloat in your recovery, because it could come back and bite you. And those that have had a bad hand in life, their parents might have been alcoholics, might have been substance users, gamblers, just didn't have good parents, maybe didn't live in a really good area, whatever it is that you might have started out with a bad hand, it doesn't mean that if you don't need to throw the cards in. Don't just act like you're never going to come up, because if you go in and you look at this as a start off as a disaster, if you look at this as maybe a learning lesson, this is my platform, this is where I'm going to stand up, this is where I'm going to start my journey, you might end up being in a lot better place than what you ever thought you were at. So I want you to really take a look at how you look at disasters, and how you look at triumphs whenever you start to get things good. I want to tell you about this story. I don't know if you have time to listen, but I'm gonna tell it anyway. So um, there was a point before I started working with the health department. I worked for a school in Rockville, and they were doing some things to the students that I didn't really think were ethical. So I brought my concerns up, and whenever I brought my concerns up, that next Friday they called me in and they fired me. And whenever they fired me, I fought it back, and ultimately they couldn't fire me because of the contract. But they let me go, and I didn't have any type of. They gave me a severance package, but I didn't have a job, and so I was looking for a job. I couldn't find one, and all of a sudden, it got to the point where I think I had, I don't know how much. I think I had like $1,100 in my bank account, and I knew I had. This is when I just had my first son, Anthony, and that was it. I didn't. I think my wife was either pregnant or she just had the baby. And whenever I was in that, I knew that I had only my rent was $1,000, and I had $1,100. I couldn't, no money for electricity, no money for gas, nothing. That was all that I had. And so I remember I went to church on this particular Sunday, and I walked in, and there was a guy there that I normally see all the time, and me and him were chatting and we were talking, and he asked me, he was like, "Man, how things are going with you?" And a lot of times I normally just say, fine, I'm doing good, because I don't want people to be in my business. I don't want to tell people, make people worry about me. And so what ended up happening was, he came to me and he just said, no, for real, like, you don't look like. And so I literally told him everything. I told him how bad my life was going. I told him I didn't have a job. I told him that my rent's due. I got enough to pay this month's rent, but that's all that I have. And he said to me, he goes, well, I'll just pray for you. And so I didn't think anything of it. I went inside church, and church service was going on. And all of a sudden, he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, come here, I want to talk to you. So we go into the lobby at the time. I think I was going to the Redeemer at the time. And um, the guy comes up to me and he goes, how much money do you need to be on your feet? And I was just like, man, I don't know. I mean, I'm just telling you, I don't have a job. I don't. And he goes, tell you what. He goes, I went and talked to my wife and we want to help you out. I was like, what do you mean by help you out? He was like, he pulled out a check out of his pocket, and he says, I want you to fill this out. And all it had was his name on the bottom. And so I wrote the check. I think I wrote the number for like $3,000. They're just thinking there's no way he's gonna let me do it. And so he looked at me and he goes, 3,000. He was like, hold on. And he changed the three and he initialed it and he made it into a five. And he said, he goes, I want you to go cash that check and I want you to go put it in the bank and I want you to pay all your bills and I want you to get yourself good. And I'm telling you, that blew my mind. When I tell you it blew my mind, I've never had anybody listen to a concern that I had and literally help me out in that particular situation like that. I've had many people help me out, but this was particular because when I took that check, I told him, man, I said, man, I'm gonna pay you back, I promise. And so I went and I cashed the check, I put it in, I paid all my bills off, and then that's whenever I had got the call from the health department. And I started that job within probably about 3 weeks. That was a God's gift, honestly. And so then when I went back, I kept giving him money every week. Every week I got paid, I would give him like $300, $400, $400. And so it came up to, I think I paid him off in like November, but then by December he came and he goes, hey, what are you doing for Christmas? And I was like, nothing, I'm gonna be in town. He was like, me and my wife want to take you out to eat. So me and him, we went out to eat, and he ended up at the end of the dinner or the lunch after church. He ended up giving me an envelope, and it was an envelope about that big. And I looked at it and I was like, what's this? And he was like, listen, he goes, I never asked you for the money. That wasn't a loan. I didn't give you a loan. I gave you a gift from me and my wife. And so we thought about it and we were going to just give it back to you right whenever you first gave it to us. But we said that because you're starting a job, you probably need it around Christmas. So we would just take all the money and then give it back to you at Christmas. And so that was one of the main reasons why I give so much, because whenever stuff has been given to you, it's only right that you give as much as you can away. And what I've learned in my life is that I can't outgive, um, especially God. I can't, because as much as I give to the community, as much as I give to my family, as much as I give, every time it keeps coming back to me to the point where I just got to keep giving again. And so I want you guys to look at where you are in your life, because if you're in a triumphant state or you're in a disaster, it doesn't matter which way you are at. It's only about what perspective you have. And if you have the right perspective through either one of those, a disaster can turn into a triumph. And if you're already at a triumph and if you have humility and you can do it the right way, you will stay on top. But even people that have good lives have bad situations happen to them. And I don't want you to allow bad situations to cause negative outcomes in your life. So um, be healthy, guys. Keep a good perspective. Just because we're going through a bad situation doesn't mean that it has to have a bad outcome. Regain yourself, regather yourself, make some plans for the future. Might not can make a plan for the next couple weeks, but you can definitely start planning for your future. And if you need to learn something, if you need to get more education, then start doing it. There's a lot of online courses. I put on leadership on my Facebook. The Harvard Leadership is giving free classes. That's something that you can get into. Whatever it is, you got to learn in the place of a bad situation, because if we can master in negative situations, we can definitely master when we're on top. So I hope that everybody's climbing. I hope no one is being depressed right now. And if you are, reach out to someone and get yourself someone to talk to, okay? I just wanted to tell you that I love you guys, and keep going, and keep making really good decisions. So stay out of trouble. It's the Cadillac Counselor. Good to see you today.